Hello everyone, my name's Dr. Paul Rose, and this presentation is the start of a series of short videos that explains the process of doing a postgraduate research project for an MSc in a biological subject. This presentation is going to be the one that you need to think about before you actually do any science, before you go and collect data, before you think about your animals or subjects that you're going to use, before you even start writing your introduction, before you actually go and implement your research design itself. It's really important that the planning stage of a research project is taken really seriously, because ironing out problems now and ironing out any issues with what you can do and what is feasible will make your life a lot easier when you actually start to collect data and think about how you're going to analyze it. So this presentation is going to go through the following aspects of doing research. We're going to think about the relationship that you have with your supervisor and the role of your supervisor in helping guide you through the process of doing an independent research project. I'm going to hammer home the importance of reading and why reading widely is essential to a valid and repeatable end piece of research. We're also going to think about the logistics of what you can and cannot do, the relevance of research ideas you might have to postgraduate study, and the feasibility of data collection. Can you actually do justice to the type of research idea you're interested in, or does it need modification or alteration to actually make it fit the aims and outcomes of your course? Remember, your research project is an independent piece of work. You own it, it's your piece of work, so you need to drive it forwards. But you must drive it forwards effectively by using the knowledge and expertise of your supervisory team. So let's talk in a little bit more detail about your supervisor. Your supervisor is your professional research friend. They're there to help develop your skills as a scientist. They're there to ensure that by the end of the research project, you know exactly what you've done and you can explain it to others. So talk to them and communicate with them. Your supervisor should be your first port of call for anything to do with the research project. They are the subject specialist. They are the ones that will know the literature and will know the methods. So if you ever feel that you're struggling or unsure, go and talk to them, communicate with them effectively, and your path to completion of your research project will be much more smooth. Ensure that you use their knowledge and experience of the subject. If they suggest something might be difficult or challenging, listen to them. If they suggest that there are ways of doing something that are different to what you have thought of, go and consider them. They will have known what has been gone before. They will know the challenges that other researchers have faced. So if they say no, it's not because they're trying to hamper your ideas. It's because they're trying to get you to think about things differently and more effectively. And when you have meetings with your supervisors, come prepared with solutions to challenges. If you have a problem, how could you potentially solve it? When you have an idea of what data you will get, how could you analyze them? Think about allowing yourself to get invested in the research and develop your skills in finding solutions to challenges, rather than simply asking your supervisor what they could do for you. It's really important that because the research project is independent, you own all aspects of it. And this includes finding out problems to the challenges that you will face. All research is challenging. All research comes up against issues that needs to be solved. By working with your supervisor, you will have a much easier ride all the way through the process of doing the research. So I want to start off by talking about reading. And I make no apologies for boring anyone listening to this about the importance of doing reading and reading widely. The more you read widely around the subject, the more you will learn about how to write and how to write academically and scientifically, and the more you will learn about what you need to write about. Reading peer-reviewed published papers will mean you can emulate that style of writing. It will develop your skills in evaluation, discussion, and critical analysis. The less reading you do, the less exposure you will have on how to write like a scientist. Everyone writes differently, but academic writing needs to be critical, objective, and unbiased. And you can only develop those skills by reading lots of articles and practicing your own writing style. You should also read to get precedents from the literature for what you need to do. It's not plagiarism to read articles and develop your methods alongside of precedent, so long as you're citing and referencing those articles fluently. People have done methods in the past that have worked and have published them for a reason. So why not, instead of reinventing the wheel, why not use that expertise to help you develop your own project? And think about what others have done and why they have done it. Think about the study populations they used, the species they used, the system they used. What gaps in the knowledge are there that you can fill by doing things differently? What is gained from repeating an idea on a novel system? Again, try not to reinvent the wheel, but think about evolving or altering the wheel to make it more fit for purpose. Reading will allow you developmental processes in your own ideas that will ultimately make your research project stronger in the long run. So when you've gone away and you've first talked with your supervisor about what you would like to do, and they have suggested some papers that would be a good starting point for reading, you can then start to define your research question. So you must shape and define a research question before you begin any writing, before you even think about doing an introduction, and even before you think about your methods. What do you want to answer? What are you interested in? A research question is not a hypothesis. A research question is inquisitive. It's the inquiry into the area of science that interests you. So think about what you could ask and how you could answer it. And that will come from your wider reading. What have others done? What approaches could you emulate, change, or adapt? Think about the knowledge gaps in the literature. Could it be easily filled with your project idea? Don't do a project on your favourite animal, for example. Do a project on your favourite research question. What do you really want to know more about? What species or system is best suited to that question? Never choose the species and then the question. Choose the question and then think about the species that fits it best. Again, as you're going through this deliberation and internal discussion about what you want to do, talk to your supervisor, communicate with them so that when you're constructing and eventually executing your project, it will be fit for purpose and get you a valid and robust data set. Remember, you can't write an introduction or describe any form of experimental design without first knowing what you're going to investigate. And the only way you will know what you want to investigate is by talking to your supervisor, by discussing with them, and by reading in the literature. So define a research question before you have any thoughts about writing an introduction and about writing methods. When you're considering your research question, it's best to think about what's feasible and achievable. This is a postgraduate piece of research. It's not a PhD. It's not a 3-year postdoc. It's not somebody with a £1.5 million research grant. Simple science is best. Yes, you need to do more than you would have done for an undergraduate project, more data collection, more complex statistical analysis, a broader research question, but don't be overly complicated or convoluted. Independence is built into you when you're an MSc research student. You need to own your project and think about what you can and cannot do. That's part of the step up between undergrad and postgrad. Think about the practicalities of experimental setups. Think about the practicalities of data collection procedures. Again, simple can be best. What do you actually need to do to answer any research question? Avoid being complicated, avoid being overly convoluted. Try not to do so much manipulation that you lose sight of the original question. Think about your time frame. How long will you need to collect data to get valid results? If you're going to do a survey, start early. Don't start a survey in the summer term if your project is due in September. You should be thinking about getting your survey out before Christmas. What are you going to test and your analysis? What are you going to do in your analysis? So therefore, how much data will you need? When defining your research question, keep data analysis and statistics at the back of your mind. You should think about the characteristics of your data when it comes to writing your methods. Don't decide on your analysis once you've got your data. How much data will you need to get valid statistical testing? You're not going to need reams and reams and reams, months and months of data, but you will need enough to be robust in the eventual analysis that you undertake. Again, you should have these conversations with your supervisor to determine what's feasible and achievable when you start designing your project research question, when you know what it is you would like to study. And now I'm going to go back to the importance of reading, because lots of the answers to questions you will have, this is a daunting and challenging process, particularly if you've never done a big independent project before. Reading is your best friend. Know your research question means knowing the literature. If you know the literature, you will know what is possible. So approach your research question with a strong grounding and foundation in what is out there in the currently available literature. Keep a record of useful papers. For example, store references by themes or topics. Make notes on the references themselves. Adobe Acrobat has a brilliant comments function where you can stick notes on various parts of a paper and come back to them. You can also highlight text so you can easily find areas that might be useful for when you write your introduction or might have experimental design information that you need for your methods. There's nothing worse than sort of remembering a useful reference because it's going to help you with your introduction, but you can't actually remember the title or the authors. So save yourself time, sort your information, sort your literature, perhaps use a referencing software such as Mendeley or EndNote, which you can put into files of your PDFs and therefore you can find them easily. You can also keep a log of references. What section will they fit into for your eventual thesis? And you can build on the bank of knowledge you have, so when it comes to using those papers, they are easily accessible. You might find papers when you are looking at your introduction that are going to be useful for your discussion. So keep a note of them as you go. It's really, really important that you get your project ethically reviewed. Nobody should start any form of research without ethical review. Ethical review is essential to the scientific method. It makes us robust, valid, objective, and credible science. Anybody performing science without ethical review is not a credible and valid scientist. You must seek guidance from your supervisor when you develop your research proposal. Your research proposal is the one that gets ethical review. And you must take on board comments from your reviewers. You can't ignore ethical review comments. You must answer those comments and ensure you are developing your proposal accordingly. No research can commence without valid ethical review, and you must ensure you have a favourable ethical review outcome before you implement any data collection methods. Again, this is part of being a valid, open and credible scientist. Please, once again, work with your supervisor. They will explain the processes of ethical review to you. They will read over your methods, your aims and hypotheses before you submit any work to ethical review. They will know what you're trying to do. They will make sure it's feasible. They will make sure it's logistically possible. A method that won't work is not ethical. That's as bad as doing a method that might be invasive, for example, or collect samples that you are not allowed to collect without a license. So be sure you've taken on board your supervisor's advice and talk to them before you submit any work for ethical review. And ensure that you have support from your supervisor as well as a favourable outcome from ethical review before you actually start any data collection. This is really important if you're talking to other people or talking to outside institutions. Please do not go and talk to any outside institutions or talk to any members of the public or a wider human sample population without prior permission from your supervisor and without a written statement from the ethics committee that allows you to proceed with your research. So, as a checklist to do in the planning stages of a research project, make sure you communicate with your supervisor and listen to their advice, act on it, and make your proposal and the development of your research questions stronger. Please read widely. I cannot stress that enough. Store PDF files with annotations or highlights, or keep notes on what papers tell you so you can refer back to them later. Remember to create your research question with help from your supervisor before you start any writing or data collection. Your research question becomes your aims and your outcomes and your hypotheses. You need to have structured your research question before you do any of the formalized writing of your research project. Please do not collect any data or start any element of your project, including talking to outside institutions, before you have approval from your supervisor. And please do not collect any data or start any element of your research before you have a favourable ethical review outcome. You can think about pilot studies and think about what is testable, but you must get permission from your supervisor and you must ensure that you're going to do nothing unethical in any pilot study, because that's going to feed into your methods. And finally, please ensure you do reading as you go through your project. Reading as you go along is really, really important. It will allow you to develop your skills as a scientist. It will develop your writing style. It will develop critical analysis and critical evaluation. Without doing the reading, you won't know the topic area. You won't know how your project fits into that topic area, and therefore you'll have a weaker overall project. I hope this has provided some useful information on what to do as you start the research process. But remember, talk to your supervisor. They will be your best friend. Communicate with them effectively, and remember to do lots of reading. Thank you very much.